All right, so today we're going deep on animal minds.
Yeah, we're really gonna have to think like philosophers here.
Totally kind of put on our detective hats too, right?
Exactly. It's a real puzzle.
So we're talking about comparative cognition.
That's right, how thinking works across the entire tree of life.
And the crazy thing is how much intelligence is out there, like in creatures we wouldn't expect.
Oh, absolutely. It's constantly surprising
I
us.
mean, Kia parrots using statistics to solve problems.
It's mind-blowing.
Jays getting fooled by magic tricks like they understand expectations.
And then the possibility of consciousness, even in bumblebees.
I mean, what even is thinking at that point, right?
It makes you question everything.
So that's kind of our mission on this deep dive.
Yeah, figuring out how researchers even approach these huge questions about animal minds.
What are the methods, the challenges, the philosophical angles?
Drawing on a whole range of disciplines.
And whether you're a scientist or just super curious about animal intelligence,
We'll keep it clear and engaging. We'll hit the key ideas, the surprising details, without getting too bogged down in jargon.
so let's start with the big picture.
Okay.
The evolutionary, the developmental, and the cultural backdrop of how we even understand animal cognition.
These are like fundamental factors shaping cognitive abilities.
It's almost like trying to understand how a chef creates a dish.
Yeah, you need to know their training, their background ingredients available.
And a key evolutionary concept is convergent evolution.
Right, the idea that similar traits can pop up independently in different species facing similar pressures.
Like inventors in different parts of the world coming up with the same solution.
Exactly.
And a classic example is wings, obviously.
Yeah, birds,
Yeah.
bats, insects.
But when we think about the mind, consider episodic-like memory.
Ah, that what, where, when memory.
Like remembering what you had for breakfast this morning?
Where you ate it, what time it was.
Exactly.
Now, researchers have found evidence of this in western scrub jays,
They need to remember their food stashes.
right? Because some of it will spoil.
But here's the kicker.
Okay.
Cuttlefish, which are mollusks,
Incredibly distant relatives of birds.
also seem to have this kind of memory.
They face similar foraging challenges.
And the fact that these two wildly different groups, separated by so much evolutionary time.
It suggests that those specific environmental demands needing to track those changing resources.
Acted as this huge selective force.
Right. It hints at how certain cognitive abilities might arise.
And that's what Alexandra Schnell and her colleagues argue.
Yeah, by studying animals far apart on the tree, like primates, corvids, cephalopods.
We get a clearer picture of what drives the evolution of complex cognition.
Memory planning, problem solving.
And if we only looked at closely related social animals,
It would be tough to tease apart whether a trait evolved because of social complexity.
or something else.
Right, for example, there's the social intelligence hypothesis.
It emphasizes social living as this driver of brain power.
The demands of those complex social relationships, cooperation, competition, deception.
But then you've got solitary creatures, like some octopus species.
Super intelligent in problem solving and camouflage, but not living in those complex groups.
So if it's not just social complexity. What else is driving their intelligence?
Yeah, what other challenges could be at play?
So we've got convergence, different paths to similar cognitive solutions.
Right,
Now let's talk about homology and development, which is about shared ancestry.
exactly. Homology refers to traits that are similar because they were inherited from a common ancestor.
So the phylogenetic approach focuses on this shared evolutionary history.
Like tool use in humans and chimpanzees.
We share a relatively recent common ancestor.
So that ability might be homologous.
We both inherited those foundational abilities for tool use.
Right, so while convergent evolution shows us different paths.
Homology helps us trace those shared evolutionary roots.
Exactly.
And the developmental approach looks at something else, right?
Yes, it examines whether similar traits come from the same underlying developmental processes.
Or genetic pathways.
Think of a bird's wing and a human arm.
They look totally different, used for different things.
But they share that fundamental skeletal structure
That develops in a similar way.
because of our shared ancestry.
So that underlying similarity is a form of homology.
Right, and some argue that a complete view requires looking at both.
The evolutionary history and the developmental mechanisms.
Exactly.
So when we're trying to understand problem solving,
It might be more informative to look at how it develops in related species.
rather than just noting that it exists in distantly related ones.
And that's what philosophers like Paul Griffiths argue.
He suggests focusing on homologous traits.
When we see convergent evolution, we often assume this direct link.
Between a problem and the evolved solution.
Not a lock and key.
But Griffiths questions that.
He argues it's unlikely that minds just evolve perfect solutions in isolation.
Right. It's this constant interaction, co-evolution.
Organism, environment, the whole package.
And he points out that some evolutionary changes might be developmentally constrained.
Meaning, some problems can't be solved in isolation.
So to really understand convergent cognitive evolution,
We'd need a deeper understanding of those species' histories and development.
which we often don't have,
Right, so studying homology, where we have that shared starting point.
might be more revealing about those fundamental mechanisms.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got evolution development. Now let's move on to culture.
Because clearly, genes and environment aren't the only things shaping behavior.
Culture in animals, what does that even mean?
In this context, it's information transmitted through social learning,
Behavior skills knowledge,
which persists over time.
leading to those characteristic patterns.
Like a chimp learning to crack nuts by watching its mother.
That skill can become a tradition.
And unlike genes, these learned behaviors can directly influence the next generation.
So it's like a fast track for adaptation within a group.
Exactly.
You also mentioned soft inheritance.
That refers to the transmission of observable characteristics through non-genetic means.
Social learning or epigenetic modifications.
And animal cultures are a prime example.
Like those blue tits that learn to peck through milk bottle caps.
That behavior spread rapidly
Because birds observed each other.
and copied the technique.
A learned behavior that became cultural.
And researchers have adapted models from biological evolution.
To study how these cultural traits evolve and spread.
Concepts like mutation transmission selection,
And Rachel Brown even argues that these traditions can influence genetic evolution.
like Darwin's finches and their beaks.
Those diverse shapes are a classic example of adaptation.
Right, to different food sources.
And it's been suggested that new foraging behaviors
Perhaps spread through social learning,
could have created those selective pressures.
favoring beak shapes best suited to those new foods.
So over generations, you get those genetic changes.
Culture shaping genes.
That's pretty wild.
It really is.
Okay, so we've tackled evolution, development, and culture.
Right.
The last foundational piece is where we study animal cognition.
Wild versus captivity.
Two drastically different worlds.
Think about chimps.
A wild chimp has this complex social life, roams huge territories, forages constantly.
Facing predators and rival groups.
A captive chimp lives in a controlled environment with regular food enrichment, different social dynamics,
And of course, where an animal lives shapes how its cognitive abilities are expressed.
even how they develop.
That's the ethological perspective.
Studying animals in their natural environment to understand their minds.
The idea is that natural selection shaped their cognition for those specific wild problems.
But then lab studies offer this level of control.
You can systematically manipulate the environment, observe how responses change.
And it's crucial for ruling out alternative explanations.
Researchers like Cecilia Hayes and Anthony Dickinson argue that's how you isolate cognitive mechanisms.
But it's so interesting that captive apes sometimes develop abilities not seen in the wild.
Yeah, like certain types of communication or tool use.
Could it be that these unnatural environments actually reveal hidden cognitive capacities?
Or even foster new ones.
It's like the environment provides this cognitive scaffolding.
A fascinating idea.
So as Tomasello and Call argue, the best approach likely involves multiple methods.
Fieldwork sets the stage, shows us the natural repertoire.
Lab experiments let us dissect the mechanisms.
And then there's the philosophical detective work of eliminating alternative explanations.
Right, because we need to be super careful when saying an animal understands cause and effect.
Or has a theory of mind.
We need to rule out simpler explanations.
Exactly, and that's where the null hypothesis comes in.
We hear that all the time in science.
In statistics, it means assuming there's no real effect.
Any results are due to chance or those extra variables.
But in comparative cognition, it often refers to simpler explanations.
Explanations that don't need fancy cognitive processes, like associative learning or behavior reading.
Right, just responding to cues without understanding mental states.
So if a raven uses a stick to get food,
The null hypothesis might be that it learned through experience that the action gets a reward.
without really grasping the causal link.
Exactly.
And this brings up a big debate.
Should these simpler explanations always get priority?
This is where Morgan's canon comes in.
Right. That idea that we should favor the lower explanation.
And Andrews and Huss argued against always favoring the skeptical hypothesis.
Right. They say we need strong justification for denying psychological complexity.
And it's true, the statistical null hypothesis has its place in experiments.
It's the benchmark.
But that doesn't mean all simpler explanations are better,
We need to consider the theory, the evidence, the plausibility.
not just be biased towards simplicity.
There needs to be a real reason to prefer one explanation.
Okay, so now let's talk about cognitive versus associative accounts of behavior.
Because associative learning seems to be the go-to simpler explanation.
It is incredibly widespread in the animal kingdom.
Classical and operant conditioning.
Pavlov's dog's the cat in the puzzle box.
Thorndike's law of effect.
But often you can come up with an associative learning explanation.
That seems to fit just as well as a more complex cognitive one.
Like the animal understands intentions or has mental representations.
And the argument is that because associative learning is simpler,
We should favor it according to Morgan's canon.
but philosophers like Hayes, Makeda, and Dacey point out that it's not so simple.
Can we always rank explanations by complexity?
And does simpler automatically mean correct?
Right. You mentioned the taxonomic ubiquity argument,
That because associative learning is everywhere, it's probably the explanation.
but there's a risk of circular reasoning.
If we always favor it, we'll always find it.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
We might miss those more complex processes.
And the line between associative learning and complex cognition isn't always clear.
Some define complex cognition as what can't be explained by association.
But that has limitations.
Associative learning models are getting really sophisticated,
Blurring the lines.
and the assumption that they're mutually exclusive is being challenged.
Right. Allen talks about relaxed pluralism.
Maybe we need to accept multiple ways of understanding cognition,
And Hayes and Papineau suggest focusing on specific capacities.
rather than drawing a grand distinction.
And Dacey says that association itself is abstract.
It can be implemented by various mechanisms.
So what's associative in one context might be more complex in another. This
Hmm.
all highlights the role of epistemic values,
What we consider hallmarks of a good explanation.
like what makes a good detective, right?
Exactly. Epistemic values are those criteria we use to judge theories.
Based on what leads us to truth and understanding.
Some are minimal requirements, like internal consistency and empirical adequacy.
Others are more ideal, like simplicity, unification, and predictive power.
So when researchers have multiple explanations,
They appeal to these values to make their case.
like the research on theory of mind in chimps,
Tomasello and Call argue that attributing theory of mind,
provides a more unified and coherent explanation.
compared to accounts based on just learned rules,
And Fletcher and Carruthers point out that those rule accounts,
often seem to just make up new rules to fit the data.
rather than making real predictions,
So there you're using unification and predictive power.
to support the more complex cognitive explanation,
And simplicity is huge in comparative cognition.
especially through Morgan's canon.
But as we said, there are philosophical objections to that.
Yeah, for one, the idea of higher versus lower faculties is often ambiguous.
What even are those?
And simpler is better isn't always a helpful guide.
There are different types of simplicity,
And they can point in different directions.
and the research context matters too.
What's simple in one area might not be in another.
So that blanket application of Morgan's canon has been questioned.
But some offer alternative interpretations.
Fitzpatrick and Goodrich say Morgan emphasized coherence with observations and background knowledge.
And the idea that higher faculties might be rarer.
And Stirliny and Curry suggest favoring traits that are more evolutionarily ancient and evolvable.
More likely to be present across species.
So it's not just about simplicity and isolation.
But about plausibility and context.
And Tomasello and Call are skeptical of strict parsimony without clear criteria.
Exactly.
So epistemic values are crucial.
But simplicity, especially through Morgan's canon, is a tricky one.
Now let's add another layer, non-epistemic values.
The ethical and practical considerations,
Because science doesn't happen in a vacuum.
especially when it involves living beings,
And Rudner and Douglas have talked about how scientists have to make judgments,
about the acceptable level of uncertainty,
especially when there are consequences,
balancing the risk of false positives and false negatives,
like believing something is true when it's not.
or missing something that's actually true.
You mentioned the habeas corpus petition for Tommy the chimpanzee.
That case really highlights these non-epistemic values,
The argument for Tommy's rights relied on cognitive evidence.
suggesting his capacity for thought, self-awareness, and suffering.
Our understanding of his mind directly informed the ethical and legal arguments,
And more broadly, how we view animal minds impacts welfare policies.
as Bakoff and Gruen have emphasized.
Right.
And Birch argued that in policy-relevant areas,
We might need to adjust our standards of evidence
based on the potential moral consequences,
if mistakenly denying a mental state has huge negative consequences.
we might need a lower threshold of evidence.
To err on the side of caution.
But setting that threshold is super tough.
There's debate about whether Birch's own criteria for sentience are too strict or too lenient.
It's a real challenge.
So the consensus seems to be that those consequences should influence our standards,
But the specifics need to be determined case by case.
considering the animal and the mental capacity.
Okay, so we've covered the foundational stuff and the philosophical detective work.
Now we get to the methodological challenges of studying animal minds.
And I think one of the first things that comes to mind for people is anthropomorphism,
It's a huge one.
attributing human qualities to animals without justification.
A classic concern in animal behavior.
And it shaped how we approach the field scientifically,
Behaviorism was a direct reaction against perceived anthropomorphism,
emphasizing observable behaviors and stimuli,
rejecting internal mental states that couldn't be directly observed.
because there's always that risk of projecting our own experiences.
Even when the animal's motivation might be totally different.
Like those studies where people see intentions and shapes moving on a screen.
Our brains are wired to look for agency,
And that's helpful for understanding each other.
but it can lead us astray with animals.
Dacey suggests anthropomorphism might be a fast heuristic.
A quick way to make sense of things,
But we need methods to counteract that bias.
maybe by studying less human-like species initially.
And Shuttleworth points out that even when behaviors suggest complex abilities,
There might be simpler explanations.
based on senses learning histories or rules,
And she says those simpler processes might even be more important in human behavior.
then we think.
It's not just about avoiding overattribution in animals.
But recognizing the potential for simpler mechanisms in ourselves, too?
And Buckner calls this anthropophabulation,
Overestimating human cognition.
leading us to underestimate animals.
But there's also the argument that some anthropomorphism can be helpful,
The idea of heuristic anthropomorphism,
using our intuition to generate testable hypotheses,
not just imposing our perspective.
but using it as a guide for questions and experiments.
And Andrews argues that our folk psychology
Our common sense understanding of minds,
is necessary for even describing animal behaviors.
like recognizing deception in primates as something to study,
So those initial descriptions can be a starting point.
even if our understanding later becomes more complex.
Exactly.
Now, closely related is anthropocentrism,
That human-centered view.
seeing humans as superior.
And it's definitely tied to concerns about anthropomorphism.
Some say avoiding anthropomorphism comes from wanting to maintain that human-animal distinction.
Right.
You mentioned Keeley's distinction between categorical and situational anthropomorphism,
Categorical is attributing something impossible for the animal to have,
like a human soul.
reflecting that anthropocentric bias.
Situational is attributing something they could have.
Like emotions or basic cognitive abilities.
In those cases, it becomes an empirical question.
Not something to dismiss outright.
And if we're too focused on human exceptionalism,
We risk anthropody.
missing those human-like qualities that are actually there,
So it's about balance.
avoiding both unwarranted attribution and denial.
Recognizing that cognitive capacities are products of evolution and development,
And their presence in animals is an empirical question.
to be answered through research.
Another challenge is underdetermination.
The fact that evidence often doesn't definitively support one explanation.
Like a good mystery novel with multiple suspects,
This is a big problem in science.
especially in animal cognition.
The same behavior could have different underlying mechanisms.
We talked about cognitive versus associative accounts,
That's contrastive underdetermination.
multiple competing hypotheses fitting the evidence. And you also mentioned holist underdetermination.
Uncertainty about whether to reject the hypothesis or some background assumption.
Like the debates about chimp theory of mind.
Early studies had mixed results.
Researchers didn't give up on the idea.
They revised their understanding of what theory of mind might look like in a chimp,
They questioned their assumptions.
refined their experiment.
So how do we even deal with this underdetermination?
It's a tough one.
One strategy is signature testing,
Focusing on the full range of information processing patterns,
not just success or failure.
but errors, limitations, biases.
looking for that detailed behavioral fingerprint,
And then there's the multidimensional approach.
breaking down complex concepts into dimensions.
Instead of asking, does this animal understand causality?
You ask about the type of information,
Hmm.
the source, the processing, the flexibility,
This can bridge the gap between different explanations,
like associative learning and complex cognition.
recognizing that they might play different roles.
And similar approaches are being used for things like innovation and consciousness. And finally, we have to talk about reproducibility.
Absolutely. How reliable are our findings?
Can we trust the results?
Reproducibility is key in any science.
And while there's been talk of a replication crisis.
It's interesting that comparative cognition actually values replication quite a bit.
Oh, that's good to know.
It's often the case that researchers will try to replicate early on.
But of course, interpreting those replications can be tricky.
There can be subtle differences.
What are called mismatch explanations.
And sometimes failures to replicate lead to revisions in our understanding.
Not a simple rejection of the original findings. And then there's the file drawer problem,
Studies with negative results are less likely to be published.
creating this overly positive picture.
So while replication is valued, there are efforts to improve things,
Pre-registering studies,
using more sophisticated statistical models.
and even changing those scientific incentives to reward replication.
We're seeing large-scale collaborations like many primates, many birds, many dogs.
These are great steps forward.
They really are.
Okay, so our final area to explore is the connection between comparative cognition and AI.
It's a surprisingly fruitful collaboration.
These two fields have a lot to offer each other.
Absolutely.
So how can AI help us understand animal minds?
Well, Colin Allen has argued for more formal models of cognitive processes.
Moving beyond those vague descriptions. Of course, there's the question of whether these models can capture real complexity,
But there are promising developments
like the intuitive physics engine.
inspired by AI physics engines,
It models how humans understand physical scenes.
including our illusions and biases.
And similar approaches are being used for animal behavior.
Reinforcement learning models for understanding classical conditioning.
Deep neural networks for sensory processing and categorization.
Monte Carlo tree search for problem solving.
And Bayesian models for communication.
Using AI tools to model the inner workings of animal minds.
It's incredible.
It really is.
Now, what about the other way around?
How does animal cognition help AI?
Well, a big goal in AI is to build machines that think like humans.
To achieve artificial general intelligence.
But creating AI with that flexible common sense reasoning is a major challenge.
Even simple animals have that.
And animal cognition researchers are providing insights into those building blocks.
Things like understanding objects, navigating space, grasping basic causality.
Studying animals can offer inspiration for AI design,
Like reinforcement learning in the 3D environments.
inspired by how animals learn to navigate.
To create more adaptable AI.
And you mentioned the animal AI testbed,
Yes, it uses protocols from comparative cognition to test AI.
a standardized set of challenges inspired by animal tasks.
To evaluate learning and problem solving.
And by comparing AI to animals and even human children.
We can see where AI excels and where it falls short,
Early comparisons show AI does well on basic navigation.
but struggles with tasks involving intuitive physics or flexible problem solving.
Things animals are good at. So this exchange between the fields is really exciting.
It is.
But you also said we need to be careful when applying those psychological concepts to AI.
Yeah, like consciousness, awareness, theory of mind.
These are complex terms with ethical dimensions.
Using them for AI without understanding the mechanisms and implications can be misleading,
But looking ahead, maybe AI could lead to new frameworks for understanding cognition.
and that could revolutionize comparative cognition.
So to wrap up, being a philosopher in comparative cognition means embracing all these methods.
Questioning assumptions, considering alternatives, being aware of our biases and the ethical stakes.
It's a dynamic field that's always changing.
It really is.
And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive showed you,
That understanding animal minds is a real intellectual journey,
offering insights into the natural world.
and even into ourselves.
And here's a final thought.
Okay.
Given all this progress in understanding both animal cognition and AI,
What does it even mean to be intelligent?
how will our definition of intelligence change?
As we learn more about these diverse minds,
Biological and artificial.
it's something to really think about.
How do we view and interact with other beings?
A big question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
See you then.